Good evening and welcome to this catechesis. And I'm sure many of you who are watching will find it an out-of-the-box topic to be dealt with. Before I'd like to start, I think we need the grace of God, and we will sign ourselves with our faith in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'm sure a lot of you young people are very high on giving importance to your physical bodies. And I know in my ministry I meet a lot of boys and even young girls who are so focused on having a chiseled body, of having a sculpted body. And one of the places and spaces where this can happen is in a place we call the gym. So the gym is a place that enables you or enhances you to build your body. And so a gym, I believe, is a sacred place because it builds your body. But there are also certain other places and spaces that I think are not really safe, and rather than building one's body, these places and spaces destroy the purpose of the human body. And one such place is the addiction to pornography. And so I'd like to title this talk as the unsacred gym of pornography. I'd like to set the base by saying that I'm not going to dwell too much on the details of pornography really. I'd like to give it more of an anthropological view and to have a more personalist opinion towards clarifying our ideas about pornography. And I think one of the important preliminary comments that can be made is that pornography is a slippery slope. And one clear incident to narrate that emerges in my mind is of this young boy called Ted. Ted was a young man like any other young men of his time. He lived in Seattle. He was a graduate from the University of Washington, and he had a great job. But this young man, Ted, was somehow obsessed with women and engaged in violence against women. He often caught hold of women or magnetized them and indulged in sexual assault, rape, and even to the extent of murdering some of these women. The police officials give us a count that as many as 30 women were victim to his sexual assaults or even have been murdered by him. And all these women range from the age of 15 to 25. So the entire United States was gripped and paralyzed with the fear of this serial killer who preyed on young girls and women. The entire administration was in a frenzy because they couldn't nail this gentleman. What turned out to be the final nail in his coffin was his last attempt of assault. He picked up a little girl of just 12 years of age from her playground, and he brutally and sexually assaulted her, and finally he killed her in a very brutal manner. The death of this little child of 12 years of age, so brutally wounded, raped, assaulted, and murdered, sent shivers down the spines of people in the country. And there was an uproar about the kind of laxity and the lukewarmness displayed by the administration because they were not able to get a grip over this gentleman. Finally, they managed to catch this young man, and he is known all over the world as Ted Bundy. For those of you who are young and teenagers, I'm sure this piece of news is absolutely new to you. But in the years to come, from my reading, the Hollywood industry intends to make a movie based on this serial killer, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was arrested, taken to court, and the highest court of the land punished him and said that he would have to die after his years of imprisonment. And there you had Ted Bundy, who was in prison. And we are told that in these years that he was in prison, a good variety of journalists, of media channels, wanted to have a coverage of him or wanted to interview him because he was almost like a celebrity, never mind of the negative kind. But he refused to allow anyone to get any sound bites from him. And then we are told just one day before the day he was to be sentenced to death, he agreed to meet, and in particular, he agreed to meet a Catholic journalist. I'm going to recommend to those of you who have a little free time that you can catch an entire glimpse of this entire interview of Ted Bundy with this Christian journalist. But what I'm picking up from this story of Ted Bundy is this, that on being grilled and questioned, Ted seemed to have told this reporter that he came from a very normal Christian family of 5 siblings. His parents brought him up with all the normal yardstick that is found in a Christian home, and he did not display or exhibit any alarming signs. While he admits that once he is gripped by this desire to possess these young women and girls, something takes over him and he is another man altogether. But he regains his composure and lives a normal life. He was not the kind that you could see on the streets of America and concluded that he looked creepy or frightening, or he had an evil eye. He looked very normal to one's gaze. But this part of his life was played out in great secrecy. How did it all begin? To that question, Ted Bundy replies that like any other young teenager of his age after his schooling years, there were magazines that were dumped on pavements or among the rubble of papers. That's where he would pick up these magazines and feast on the nude pictures available then. We're talking of a time when there was no explosion of the Google media, or there were no smart Android phones that by the click of a little button we could have visual treats like we do today. This was the start of his journey. So he was interested in reading a lot of detective magazines and watching a lot of porn material in magazines that he got hold of in his earlier years. And that led him down the slippery slope to becoming a serial killer who almost raped and murdered about 30 women. On being prodded with the question, it is strange that Ted Bundy brings to light a little information, and I have this information clarified when you read up on the net. That when the FBI commissioned a special study of criminals lodged in prisons all across the United States of America, they found in the sociological questionnaire that they had designed a pattern of answers that seemed common to all these hardcore criminals. And one of the common denominators among the first four to all these hardcore criminals lodged in the prison confines was this, that they were addicted to pornography and believed and indulged in violent pornography. So I think I do not have to impress upon you more than is necessary that pornography is an evil and is a slippery slope that is available to the digital natives or to the digital generation that seems to have brought our young people on the edges of disastrous decisions which can affect your whole life ahead of you. So what then is pornography? We're talking about addiction to pornography. Addiction is something that you cannot control, beyond your control, and usually it is connected with something that is harmful to you. And we're talking of addiction to pornography. The word pornography itself comes from the combination of two Greek words, porneia and graphein. The word porneia can be translated from Greek to English as a whore or a prostitute. And the Greek word graphein or graphos means to depict or to draw. So from the very etymology or from the word pornography, it is very clear that it is not something pleasant. It has got a certain sense of connotation that it is not a pleasant reality. In my ministry of all these years of being with young people, I often stump the adult world when I tell them that when people think that the biggest addiction for the young generation of today is not brown sugar, is not marijuana, is not some substance abuse. The greatest narcotic drug for our young people today is the addiction to pornography. And I think this is where we need to be careful. We need to become a more aware and enlightened young person. We need to become a more mature parent in our dealing and in our ways of parenting and guiding our young people around us. So I think it's important for us to understand that we need to know that not every bit of information that we have on Google or on our websites is formation. On the contrary, it is something that might not lead to good formation, and our faith must accompany us to make choices to go through a reformation of these negative realities, so that once we have gone through this reformation, there can be a transformation of the Christian character, so that we understand the purpose of the human body, which is exploited in a throwaway culture of our times on the digital media. Now, why is pornography really dangerous? We all know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Pornography, by its very definition of the Longford definition, gives us a very clear understanding. The Longford definition is making a statement when it says, pornography is that which exploits and dehumanizes sex, so that human beings are treated as things and women as particular sex objects. I'd like therefore to place the reality of pornography in the context of our world. What we see on the reel of our television screen, what we see on the reel of our mobiles, what we see on the reel, R-E-E-L, is not the R-E-A-L, real, or is not the reality around us. And so I'd like to tap on a few of the realities around us. The first of these that I want to draw our attention to is the magnitude of the reality. I think it takes no rocket science for us to really learn the immense amount of dollars that are pumped into the porn industry. My reading and research led me to discover, and we are told that billions and billions of dollars are pumped in by the porn industry, and they have only one purpose: to create an entire generation that will become vulnerable and addicted to the scourge of porn. It is strange that research tells us that all the revenue pumped into the football industry, all the revenue of the world pumped into basketball and baseball put together is nothing compared to the actual revenue dumped in by the porn industry to make porn a viral disease. So the magnitude of the reality is alarming, and we need to pay attention to this because it must warrant our attention as young people, as teenagers, as disciples of Christ, as parents, as adults, as youth animators. That famous movie, American Pie, already several years ago, made a good over $230 million worldwide because it was feeding on the sexual appetite of humanity. So we realize that the magnitude of the reality is so large. Research tells us that almost an 83% of youth watch pornography at home. They are all consumers of online pornography. 72% are given to be male and 28% account for the women. And 70% of men between the ages of about 34 and even starting with the age of 12 watch porn sites almost on a daily basis. So this is the magnitude of the reality. The second is the mythical reality, or the myth of this reality. What is the myth of this reality? Most addicts and young people believe that pornography cannot be an addiction. Because when we are used to hearing the word addiction, what we generally think that alcohol can make me an addict, substance abuse or drugs can make me an addict, because the traditional idea is in these I inject something into my body, or I dunk in alcohol that enters my body. But pornography is not really addictive. This is the myth about this reality. It is for our amusement. Little to wonder that the porn industry has made this an amusement park for our generations, which takes our vulnerable minds and our bodies into a ride which is a roller coaster reality. But it is a myth to believe that we're not really affected by the addictions of pornography. What do we make about the myth of this reality? It is interesting that the founder of the internet, Tim Berners-Lee, made this comment. He wrote, "The web is more a social creation than a technical one. I designed it for social effect, to help people to work together, and not as a technical toy." He emphasized, we have to ensure that the society we build with the web is the sort we intend. Too often, we have our fantasies that make us believe that this is the reality. This is merely the myth of the reality. And then I want to pass on to what I'd like to call the scientific reality. I think this aspect is before us. If we are so much of a Google generation, you can Google and you will discover that there are so many psychological and neurological researches that have thrown up data beyond doubt to convince us that pornography and an addiction to pornography is bound to cause you damage socially, with your interrelationships, with your psychological health, with your sexual health when you engage in a marital relationship. The data is beyond doubt that science has proved that someone who is addicted to porn viewing will find him or her in trouble. The neurologist Dr. Norman, in The Brain That Changes Itself, describes pornography as causing a rewiring of the neural circuits. The brain center that controls impulsiveness becomes supercharged, and the brain center for willpower shrinks. Those, in fact, addicts who have struggled with alcohol, drugs, and pornography, sociological surveys tell us that it is easier for a drug addict to be addicted. It is easy for an alcohol to be detoxified and to work on his alcoholic addiction. But it is twice more difficult and challenging for a porn addict to get rid of that addiction. Because the damage that it causes you into your neural pathways and in your circuit system. That's what the scientific data throws up for us. Albert Mohler talks about this addictive power of pornography for men. Even as technology has brought new avenues for the transmission of pornography, modern research also brings a new understanding of how pornography works in the male brain. With this research, we come to realize that this does nothing to reduce the moral culpability of males who consume pornography. It does help to explain how the habit becomes so addictive. And so we realize that those of us who believe in rational scientific data must learn to absorb the wealth of such analytical information available from science that it can cause us some harm. We're not just human beings, we're more than that by virtue of our baptismal calling. And so it is important that we take note and take to heart and mind and the rest of the body what I want to bring to your attention as the biblical reality. The scriptures tell us very clearly that each of us was created, as Genesis says, in the image and in the likeness of God Himself. We are the image, the Salem, and the likeness, the Demuth of the Creator God. And when we read the passage of creation in the book of Genesis, we realize that God as Creator takes the dust of the earth and He fashions man. And the biblical author is careful to say there that the God of the universe, after having fashioned man, bends low and breathes His own breath into the nostrils of man. This seems to be an account of creation that points out the intimacy of God in the creation of us as human beings. So we were created, our bodies were designed for a higher purpose. We were created male and female, Adam and Eve. And God gave this command to be fruitful and to multiply. After God has finished His act of creating every other thing, God often says, "And it is good." But when He creates man, for the first time, God dares to say, "It is not good." Of course, He puts a comma and continues. It is not good for man to be alone. Which means that loneliness was never God's intention for humanity. He wanted us to live in companionship and in relationship with one another. And so we were fashioned as men and women, as male and female, for a very higher calling, to build among ourselves mutual love, which is the foundation of a Christian marriage. Mutual love that goes further into procreation. Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful does not mean that we go and buy an acre of land in Goa and plant cashews and mangoes and fruit grow on the tree. And multiply doesn't mean getting your Casio calculator and counting your dollars. Be fruitful and multiply is the message of God that our bodies were created to be gifts to the other, and our sexuality, which must be celebrated, must be lived out, must be enjoyed in the context of a Christian marital relationship. So whenever we engage in a sexual idea that goes beyond the parameters of a Christian marital relationship, the church would want us to bear in mind that this goes against the teaching of the church. Saint Pope John Paul II wrote the powerful TOB, the Theology of the Body, which is a series of lectures on the beauty of the human body. A teaching that he gave over 5 years of his pontificate, in which he gave us the deeper meaning of the human body. It is through the human body that we begin to discover the power of love. God sent His only Son in the form of a human body to communicate that love. Our bodies therefore become instruments of the highest form of love. It is in and through my body that I communicate love. So as young people, when we consider the body as a medium of recreation, we do violence to what God intended for the human body. I'd like to draw your attention that our faith is defined, or the signature statement of our faith is the cross. Those two planks of wood on which was nailed almost the naked human body of Jesus Christ. And I'm reiterating here that the body is designed and was created for a higher calling, where my body becomes an act of self-giving and sacrifice to the other that I love. And that is what Christ exhibited by allowing his body and a naked body to be nailed on those two planks of wood that have become the symbol of humanity. It is beautiful when we look beyond the cross and we discover that Jesus gave us that sacrament par excellence of the Eucharist at the Last Supper. And the document on sacred liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium, teaches us right at the beginning that the Eucharist is the source and the summit of Christian life and worship. And when we celebrate the Eucharist, we have that integral part of the Eucharist, which when we celebrate is called the consecration, where we repeat the words of Jesus when he said, "This is my body given up and shed for you." So the purpose of the body is to be given up and shared with another as an act of true love. And as disciples of Christ, as witnesses of faith, as adherents of Christianity, we are called to believe in the power of this teaching that our bodies were always meant to be exhibited and celebrated in the context of a Christian message. This is what the biblical reality teaches us. But when we go far from this, when we go away from this, when we indulge in pornography, what is it that we are doing? We're going to just dive into this little scriptural nugget of Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. And here's what it says. "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and dug out cisterns for themselves, cracked cisterns that can hold no water." Jesus is the living water. And when we partake of this living water, he says we will thirst no more. That's what he told the Samaritan woman. But when we engage in loose sexual behavior, and when we engage in an appetite of pornography, then, as the text says, we reject the fountain of living water and we partake of cisterns. And the meaning of cistern is a container for storing water, especially one that is connected to the toilet. That means we are ready to go to the dirt and the filth of life rather than quench our thirst from the living water that is Jesus Christ. And so we need to take recourse to this. And sometimes, as young people or as adults, we pay no attention to this. We take this in our stride, even in our jokes. For example, there's this famous comedian in the United States, Tom Leckis. And I think we must be offended by the kind of comments that he makes. At one of his shows, the comment he made was this. He said, "Women are urinals for men to go and leave behind their fluids." Women are urinals for men, or they are toilets for men to go and leave their fluid. How offensive can we get as a humanity? And then to laugh at this as if to say we're in a comedy circus amusing ourselves. I think this is important for us to note, that the scriptures warn us time and again about knowing the true beauty of our bodies. Back again in the book of 2 Samuel, you have the story of the young King David. And we all know there are as many as 929 verses about King David in the Old Testament in his story. But many of us remember 3 verses, and that is something we never forget about King David. That evening when he walked up to the roof of his palace and he saw a naked woman have a bath, and he began to have lust that conquered his heart. And that lust conquered not just his heart, it moved from the bathroom of Bathsheeba to his bedroom. He began to plot in his mind. He began to have lust. It led him to commit adultery. It led him to plan and plot the murder of Bathsheba's husband Uriah the Hittite. The slippery slope of pornography. Remember, the text in 2 Samuel tells us David saw a woman having a bath. That's an equivalent to our times of pornography, because we are seeing these images on the screen. We're watching this live demo ruckus of human beings being exploited and women being objectified as sexual objects for our pleasure. And therefore, when we do a thorough study of the Decalogue, or better known as the 10 Commandments, and we go in depth to study that Decalogue, thou shalt not commit adultery, the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the UCAT teaches us a string of elements that we need to be worried of, starting from Catechism of the Catholic Church 2351 that talks about lust, then masturbation, then adultery, and one of the clauses here is pornography. The church dares to call pornography a sin, something that is part of our throwaway culture that dehumanizes human beings. This is what Pope Francis has recently said in the document of youth, Christus Vivit, to young people. We need to reject this throwaway culture which dehumanizes us as merely as sexual toys for the appetite of a porn industry. So the biblical reality warrants our attention. And then I want to talk to you also about the ground reality or the ethical reality. The P of pornography is not limited. It spreads its tentacles beyond that one point. The P of pornography leads to the P of prostitution. And here comes a host of ethical questions that raise their ugly head. That we need to be conscious and we need to ask questions about these. For example, we've all heard that famous series of the 50 Shades of Grey. And we have that famous, beautiful actress, no doubt, Dakota Johnson, who played the leading character in this film, 50 Shades of Grey. Mind you, and check it out for yourself, she has gone on record at filmfare festivals and shows. She sat on chat shows on television channels in which she has openly said that she has forbidden her mother to watch that film. She has pleaded with her mother never to ever watch that film, 50 Shades of Grey. Why would Dakota Johnson put an embargo? Why would she put a pressure control on her mother not to watch that film of hers? I think I don't need to give you an answer for that, because we are reasonably an intelligent audience of what is there in those 50 shades of gray. It's not just gray, it's 50 shades of black as well, if I may say. So there is the truth about this ground reality and the ethical reality of what this does to us. And it's sad that pornography then can become the springboard to prostitution. And we have ample evidence when we study the topic of human trafficking about little girls to the age of 8 and 9 who are abducted or magnetized or stolen and pushed into the flesh trade. And it is really sad. And we think there's nothing wrong about it because everything is just at the click of a mouse. Each of us, when we click that mouse to watch any porn material, we're responsible for assassinating the lives of those women or those victims or those men on the screens who are exploited. If you dare to go and talk to porn stars, you will be scandalized by what they will reveal to you. They will tell you that very often as many as 20 to 30 people are auditioned in various postures and poses, and then they are all rejected, where only one finally is chosen for the porn film. What do the other 29 have left with them but to enter the prostitution industry? That they have to be drugged and overdosed, and they take liquor and very strong methane drugs in order to be able to do those violent sexual acts. Because there is a hidden sense of violence in pornography that is evident and which is researched and proved. Just the click of a mouse. Maybe we can take a little bit of a light viewing on what really happens.
This is Anna. Wait, don't click to someone else yet, because Anna's stuck here on your computer screen. And while you can walk away, her image is stuck on the internet. See, your fantasy is Anna's nightmare. There's a good chance recruiters lured her with flattery. Perhaps they baited her with cash. Maybe they even tranquilized her with date rape drugs. And if Anna's like many others, she stays sedated with alcohol, weed, or coke to numb the pain. Chances are she faces STDs and HIV because she's denied access to protection. We don't know what she's been through because we only see Anna smiling. And they keep showing Anna smiling so that you'll keep watching. See, pornography is integral to human trafficking and prostitution. In 9 countries, almost half, 49%, said that pornography was made of them while they were in prostitution. This generation fights sex trafficking more than anyone ever has, and more than anyone ever has, this generation consumes porn. Fighting human trafficking and then watching porn is like protesting a corrupt politician and then donating to his campaign. You browse privately, going from Anna to Zoe and back to Anna. Watch your favorite fantasy and then walk away. But Anna's still there. She's stuck there, stuck in this life because you click. Each click, each link, each URL visit and play button, this is the currency of porn. This is the price of Anna's life. The $100 billion pornography industry is fueling the appetite for children as well. Teenage girls now make up the biggest slice of viewable porn, which by definition is considered trafficking. The demand for porn fuels the trafficking industry, and you can take away that demand. You can cut the cord on this machine. You can bankrupt the system. You can empty the pimp's pockets. You can free Anna by simply refusing to click.
It is strange. And I would encourage parents and youth and adults to watch this TEDx talk by a young gentleman called Ran Gaviriel. He gives a beautiful talk on this addiction to pornography. of how he struggled as a victim and now has emerged as a champion to fight a just cause. How beautifully he reveals that many of these porn stars, the lifespan of those who are involved in pornography in his country, their maximum lifespan is about 48 to 50. And the reason is because the amount of drug intake that they are required to be part of cuts short their life. It's unimaginable what we see on the ground reality. And this must raise ethical questions for all of us as disciples of Christ. It's not as simple as going into the privacy and the secrecy of your washroom or your bedroom and getting a little aroused that leads you to masturbate, and you think that it is not harmful at all. It is going to affect the relationships of your life. Once you are addicted to pornography, you will realize that this is going to affect your marital relationships. And this is going to damage your life in the long run. So this is the ground reality before us. And then we come to another reality which I call the illusory reality. What is the illusory reality? We often feel that we are able to overcome this. Like an alcoholic always says, oh, I'm not addicted to alcohol. I can give it up whenever I want. I think this is an illusion, that we're not going to be trapped into this illusory reality. And so it is important for us to take stock of this curse that is unleashed around us, our youngsters, our adult generation. And everybody is a victim to this. Everybody is a victim to this. So what do we make of it? Is there no salvation? No, of course there is. Nothing of what I've said, and you've realized that usually when I talk I'm a little humorous, but a topic like this doesn't call for any comedy on my part because it demands a serious attention. But the idea here is not to condemn anybody who has gone to pornographic viewing, or even if you're addicted to it. I mean, we can take solace in what Pope Francis repeatedly emphasizes when he says that the church is a field hospital, is a place that you can bring your woundedness, your bruises, your addictions, and emerge because there is healing power in the cross. There is healing in the body of Christ, which believes in the gift of salvation. And so may I urge that if your friends or you are addicted to the scourge of pornography, we take this bruise and wound to the field hospital of the church. That first of all, we take this reality before God, but not in an illusory manner. Now imagine if one of you had a fall on the football ground, you went to give a Pele kick and were dribbling the ball very well, and you came down with a big thud, and you could hear almost your bone crack up on the football ground there. I mean, your coach and your football team members would be stupid to gather around you in a circle and say, let's recite the rosary to Our Lady, the sorrowful mysteries. Or let's take him to the private chapel and lift him to the Blessed Sacrament that he will be healed. You're not going to be healed with that. That is a naive spirituality. What is required is that your coach takes you to one who is a bone specialist, that you will have to go through an X-ray machine. They will have to identify the breakage of your bones. You will have to be attended to in your physical wounds. You will be given a certain sense of a discipline. Your leg may be in a cast for a month. You will be stopped from playing or exercising with your leg. And along with that, then yes, you lift your situation in prayer. But you are not so blind and dumb to say, I don't need to go to a doctor. I don't need to go to a medical place. I rely only on the power of prayer alone. I think that would be an illusory effect, stupid as it would seem. So we need to first of all admit if we are addicted to pornography. Once we admit that I am addicted to pornography because of my consistent viewing that I'm not having a control over, I need to trust somebody else besides me. I need to trust an adult, a mentor, not your classmate, not the guy you play football with, not your best buddy. You need to take somebody as your mentor, as your guide, who is about 10, 15 years older than you, who has walked the journey of life, will not be condemning of you, but will accompany you with love, but will become a relationship to which you are accountable. You have to be accountable. Because when you share this struggle, this news around your life that you do in secret and you live in that guilt, you will have to trust your mentor, your spiritual director, your guide, whether a priest, whether a college professor, whether a youth animator, whether a deacon, whether a parent. You will have to trust the truth with them. And then you will have to engage in a certain sense of the disciplining of yourself. You will have to identify what are the triggers in my body. What is my data usage? Would it require of me to move my computer from my bedroom and keep it in a common space so that I'm in the domain of a common space when I sit there, so I'll not be tempted to go into it? Can I engage in a healthy outlet of maybe playing a good game of football, or engaging in ballet dancing, or engage in singing that can creatively use my physical, emotional energies to build my emotional quotient in a healthy direction? Of course, we're not saints. We're all sinners with skeletons around us. But having admitted this, rather than slip down the slippery black hole, we're called to surrender ourselves to being as good disciples of Jesus Christ. To offer this ray of hope to our lives, to what we have to become. And this would become important for us, that we take ourselves to prayer, that we engage in discovering a mentor or a guide, that we learn to become accountable, that we learn to get disciplined with a timetable, that we learn to identify the triggers. And when we are caught in this web of temptation, we immediately dial this person that I can talk to and who can lead me away from that momentary failure of rushing back into the scourge of pornography. And then we have the beautiful sacrament of reconciliation, where I can go to confession and unburden myself to the priest without worrying that that information will be leaked. According to the code of canon law, the important clause for the sacrament of reconciliation teaches us that the sacrament of reconciliation is bound by the seal of inviolability, which means no priest can ever reveal what you have shared in the confessional outside. And God has forgiven you for that. It's like God has taken your sins, your addictions, put it in a nice little bag, and He takes that bag in the depth of the waters. Not only has He taken that bag into the deep waters, but He has thrust that bag right down. Still better, God takes a little pole and He puts a little notice there: no fishing, so that nobody would have access to your sinfulness. We need to access these opportunities where we grow in a very, very healthy manner. We need to ask and seek the help of the other in order to be able to deal with this. Whether it is ourselves, whether it is our friends, whether we as adults, it is important for us to take note that pornography is a terrible disease that we must learn to find a vaccination from. And I'm going to come to a little bit of a step method that is used even by Alcoholics Anonymous. Just like they have an entire system of recovery, I chanced upon this lovely 12-step method of recovery. Step 1, as I mentioned, admit honestly your powerlessness over addiction and lust, that your life has become unmanageable. Step 2, come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, wellness, and psychological normalcy. So this will bring hope. Step 3, make a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God. Step 4, make a searching and fearless written moral inventory, which means truthfulness. Step 5, admit to God, ourselves, and this other mentor the exact nature of our wrongs, even make a confession of it. 6, willingness that God removes all these defects of lust and sexual addiction, which will cause a change of heart. Step 7, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings out of humility. Step 8, we make a list of persons harmed and become willing to amend ways by not harboring ill against others who have harmed us, or we have harmed others. Forgiveness. Step 9 would be make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when doing so would injure them or others. An aspect of restitution and reconciliation. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when wrong, promptly admit it, which is a daily accountability. Step 11, through prayer, meditation, improve conscious contact with God, pray for knowledge of His will and the power to carry it out. Step 12, having a spiritual human awakening. As a result of these steps, we carry this message to other addicts. So healing is something that will come our way and is a real process that we need to embark upon if we have become a victim to this. Pornography isn't, my dear friends, an imagined attack on our lives by a church that is obsessed with moral codes. It is a reality. Hence, awareness and a proactive stance will help us address prevention and regain wellness with the support of family, friends, and therapy. And I'll close. But before I close, I'd like to add one point. That very often we may have become a victim to pornography because of something terrible that has happened in our growing years. Probably the abuse encountered when we were little kids, which has left a deep scar on the psyche of our minds and bodies. All the more, this calls for our attention so that we are liberated from these wounds that are keeping us clutched within. Let us learn to treat the human body as the sacred gym. Let us believe, as Scripture tells us, that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. I wish you well. I wish you celebrate your bodies and celebrate the gift of your sexuality as God intended for us. God bless and have a wonderful day.